Old English is a beer, Middle English is a language, and Anglicana is a style of handwriting. Today I'm going to show you some tips for reading 15th century handwriting. Hi, I'm Vanessa Wilkie, the Senior Curator of Medieval Manuscripts and British History at the Huntington Library. In our library, we have 12 million items that are broken up into 14 different collecting areas. So the item we're looking at today is our prized Ellesmere Chaucer, which fits our medieval manuscript collection. It's obviously a window into British history, but it's also an icon of British literature. Even though this is written in English, it sometimes doesn't look like it is. So we're going to talk about how to recognize those letters, how to break down the letters and words so that you can read the original sources. We're going to talk about how to shape those letters with a quill and how being able to write those letters actually does help us read better. So recognizing the unique qualities of the scribe's hand who wrote the Ellesmere Chaucer is a way that's going to help us recognize the patterns and start to see familiarity or build familiarity with the letters. There's a couple things that you want to keep in mind. When we write the letter A, our hands, we use different styles. So it could be an A. Sometimes we use an A like that, which is a single lobed A. If there's a whole closed circle, we call that a lobe, like your earlobe. A lot of times people would write A's that have the top lobe connects to the bottom, and we call that a double lobed A. It's really confusing because sometimes it looks like a B with the two closed circles, but they're actually A's. So one of the first letters you're going to want to look for is how did this particular scribe shape the letter A? Another thing that makes things slightly more complicated is remembering the fact that they weren't writing with Sharpies and they weren't certainly typing on a laptop or keyboard. They were using an ink and quills. In this case, they're using iron gall ink. And I just so happen to have a trusty stash of iron gall ink. But you need a sharp quill to be able to be precise with the way that you write. And the best way to keep your quill sharp is with downstrokes. You'll be able to feel it or hear it if you're writing with a quill. It's so much smoother to go down than it is to go up. It sounds like nails on a chalkboard when you're writing upstrokes. If you're doing the letter N, it's a downstroke and a downstroke instead of the way that we make N's, which is like down and up, because the quill doesn't work very well when it's trying to go up and sideways. That variation between being able to recognize the script, like in the Ellesmere Chaucer, it's Anglicana formata is the standard style of script. But then we look closely at the details of the scribe's hand, and that helps us start to recognize patterns in letter shapes that we're going to apply to being able to expand into reading entire words. I's and J's are the exact same letter in the 15th century. They're interchangeable. U's and V's are also interchangeable. So June, I-V-N-E, or J-U-N-E, however you prefer to transcribe it. But you need to know that when you're looking at it, they see those letters as the same thing, even though we read them as totally different. You also want to keep in mind there's no punctuation and there's no consistent spelling at all. So even the person who's transcribed or the scribe who's making the document will spell the exact same word totally differently throughout, and it's completely fine for them. Oftentimes you'll see a letter Y, and you read it, we see it as a letter Y, and it's followed by a Y-E, like ye old Yankee workshop or ye old candle shop. The truth is, in the 15th century, the Y is a letter that we don't use anymore. It's called a thorn. We recognize it as a Y, but they would recognize it as a totally different letter. It makes a TH sound. So what we see as ye is actually the. If they want to use an actual letter Y, like the month of May, they would do a Y with a dot over it. And that indicates to the scribe or to a 15th century reader, oh, this is a thorn, this is a Y. Totally normal for them, extremely confusing for us today. So you need to keep this stuff in mind while you're trying to do your transcriptions. The other letter that they use that we don't use at all and is totally unrecognizable to us is called a yogh. It's Y-O-G-H. This letter kind of looks like a 3 to us, but it's a letter when they write it. This letter can either be a TH sound or a GH, like enough. So now that you've got this foundation of different letter shapes, what they may or may not be, how scribes have no sense of spelling whatsoever, let's use these tips to take a look at the real thing. This is the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. The tales originally kind of circulated individually, more episodically. And then at the end of the 14th century, and the beginning of the 15th century, people, scribes, started putting them, possibly one scribe, started putting them all together. The scribe started working on this, which we call the Ellesmere Chaucer. So when you start to go through, the first thing you do is find some letters that you can hold on to that you recognize. Is it an A? Is it a G? Is it an H? The first illuminated initial here, this is actually a letter that we read. So it's a W. It's two V's crossed together. So we know it begins W. It's a four-letter word. It begins with a W. And then, oh, lo and behold, there's that double-lobed A that we talked about. So the third letter is an A, and you start to break it down that way. So it's W-H-A, and there's that N that we talked about, those two minim lines that connect that are downstroke, downstroke. So W-H-A-N. Remember that I said that spelling, our modern conventions of spelling, are irrelevant to this. So this is actually when, but it would be like Juan. You really need to go letter by letter, not word by word. The second word, T-H-A-T, that. When that, the third word, a big swoopy A. Then there's a line that goes down with a loop. It's a P. R. Let's stop at R. R is a tricky one. R is, in this manuscript, he uses what's called long R's. This R, you can kind of, once you know it's an R, you recognize it, but it dips way below the normal line. So A-P-R-I-L-L. April, the month of April, with that extra L added because spelling is irrelevant in this world. So when that April, with his shores soot. Shores meaning like showers, April showers. It's S-H-O-U-R-E-S. Soot, S-O-O-T-E. Then you have to ignore this W because it only applies to the very first line, and then you read just the written text from there on out. So you've got the, T-H-E, no thorn, just the T-H-E, drought, D-R-O-G-H-T-E, of March, hath pierced to the root. And there's that R, that long R, O-O-T-E. You know, sometimes they add extra E's at the end of words. The next line, the third line, and bathed, we come to the word every. E-V-E-R, there's that Y with the little dot over it. So we know that it's a Y, not a TH. If you come to a word that you don't know and you think you've got a couple of the letters but not all of them, just put brackets around it and use little dashes, each dash to represent one of the letters you think is there, and then include the letters that you know are there. And you'll go back and you'll play hangman again with yourself. And it's really phenomenal to have access to literature and historical records through transcribed critical editions like this. But there's something really special about being able to read the original sources and see it for yourself. When you look at the original source material, you connect to the source in a totally different, more intimate way. Don't get frustrated. One short video is not going to give you all the tools that you need to be able to transcribe something like the Canterbury Tales. But if you want to give it a try, you can click on the link in the description and you can see pages from our digitized Ellesmere Chaucer. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this.